Hello and welcome to your first lab introduction video. So I will be your professor this semester. My name is Professor Jeremy Patrich, and the purpose of these videos is really to walk you page by page through these labs that you will be able to complete on your own. I've done this many times before with online courses. This is the first time I've really been able to integrate videos as well, so I'm very excited about this. But I do know that between the content found within the course, the video lectures, and then this instructional video, I feel very confident that you should be able to complete each and every one of these labs in less than 3 hours, which is the normal time that you would use in class to do it. You will find that some labs will take you a lot less, and some might take you a little bit longer, but the purpose of these labs is to really integrate the content that has been learned in the lecture course. So, that being said, it's imperative that you work through the lecture content first and or at the same time as working within these labs. If you try to complete the labs first, they will become very challenging. So I highly suggest, as I said, you either complete the lecture content first or you do them at the exact same time. So let's begin. This is Lab 1, which introduces location and distances on Earth. So throughout this lab, as we will see, we will learn to observe and interpret latitude, longitude. We'll look at location and place. We will also look at the public land survey and how time works along the globe, meaning why is it one time on the west coast versus a different time at the east coast at the exact same moment. So again, the purpose of this video is really to walk you page by page to give you some of the language and some of the information that may not be presented within the text itself. So let's begin. Looking at Lab 1, location and distance on Earth, we learned that the Earth and globe itself is an oblate spheroid, which means it's a circle, essentially. It's a little bit bigger in the middle. We can distinguish that circle by looking at a system of latitude or longitude. So perhaps you can see my mouse floating around the screen. Latitude starts along the equator. I think of them, as I compared in the lecture, as pizza pans. So this is the greatest pizza pan, the greatest circle around the Earth going laterally. Then we move up here to 20 degrees north. It's still a circle, but a little bit smaller. 40 is still a circle, but smaller in distance, so on and so forth until you get to 90 north, which is the North Pole. So we learned that latitude, measured from the center of the Earth outward, starts at 0 and maxes at 90 degrees north or south. That line, the equator, which has a value of 0 degrees, separates the globe into two hemispheres. Now we can do the same thing going the other way, which are looking at meridians. Meridians are lines of longitude. They run through the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England at 0 degrees, and everything is either going to be east or west of that location. We find that it goes from 0 degrees longitude all the way to 180 degrees, which makes sense, right? Because if you travel from 0 at the line of longitude, 180 degrees towards the west, and if you go back to 0 and travel 180 degrees towards the east, 180 plus 180 is 360 degrees total. And that's what this really does explain to you. Again, latitude, like a ladder or lines that go this way. They also, as you notice, they are parallel and they never intersect. Longitude is opposite. They all intersect at one point. They're half of great circles. So with this information found here and what I've now given you, you should be able to complete questions 1 through 3. So that we jump to the next page. Something that I've already mentioned is that the length of distance along lines of latitude decrease as you get closer towards the poles. Perhaps you've run track and field and you've seen it there. You know, when someone is doing professional track and field around a racetrack, they stagger everyone, right? Because the person who's on the innermost part of that track will travel the least distance than someone who's farther out, right? So now that we know that the world is round, right, and that if we travel, north or south of the equator, then go around the Earth going east or west, those distances as you get farther north become smaller. So think about it. if someone wanted to walk around the world, if they go from the equator, wrapping all the way around the world, they're traveling all 360 degrees, right? That's a circle, plus the distance, whatever that calculates to in miles. Well, versus someone who lives up by the North Pole, they can travel all the way around the world by just spinning in a small circle, right? Because you're still going in a small circle, still completing all 360 degrees, but the distance is different. I compare it in the lecture video as to pizzas, right? Someone says, oh, I ate a whole pizza. And it's like, well, okay, what size? Is it the jumbo pizza or a personal size? Because regardless, we still acknowledge that it's a circular pizza, but we know that the distance or the circumference around that pizza will vary. So how much does it vary? Well, this table will inform us of that. Along the equator at 0 degrees, every degree that you travel east or west along the equator is 69.171 miles. Well, if you move 10 degrees north and travel east or west around the globe, it's now 69.128 miles, and so on and so forth. So we live about 34 degrees north here in Los Angeles. So we're looking at 59.956 miles per degree when traveling east or west. Notice that's a 10 mile per degree difference in someone at the equator. So moving forward, you can say, well, what would be the distance around the world at 40 degrees south latitude? Well, we know all the way around the world is 360 degrees times the 53.063 that we get at 40 degrees of latitude. And then that will give us the total distance in miles around the world at 40 degrees south latitude. A little hint, these values, 40 degrees south that I said here, these are the same values at 40 degrees north. It's the same. So you can use it backwards if the question said perhaps, what is the distance around the world at 40 degrees north? You could use the same value. Moving on to question 8, this gets a little more complicated. It says, how many miles are between 2 points along 60 degrees north latitude and 30 degrees west and 60 degrees east longitude? Well, what does that really mean? It sounds very confusing. Well, we know that both these locations, there's technically 2 locations here. There's 2 points that share the same latitude and different longitude. So if I go back to the earlier page, they're at the same latitude, but they're 2 different longitudes. So this graph I use as I represent, if I took a line of latitude and I peeled it off the globe and I slapped it onto a piece of paper, how can I visualize circular distance around the world on a singular line? Well, that's how I would do it. So in this case, this line of latitude is equal to the values at 60 degrees north, which is 34.674 miles per degree of distance. Perfect. Then I know that the 2 locations, one is 30 degrees west and the other one is 60 degrees east. Well, 30 west goes here, 60 east goes here. I know that between 30 west all the way to 60 east, there are 90 degrees in total that separate 30 west to 0 and 0 to 60 degrees east. There's 90 degrees in total. So if I want to see how many miles are between those 2 points, I would take, first step, the total distance in degrees, which in this case is 90, and then multiply it by the distance per degree along the latitude of 60 north. So my problem would say 90 degrees times 34.674, and then that would give me my final answer. And you would do the same thing for question 9. And you will have to do this again later, so just make sure you understand how that works. But we're looking as 2 people that live in 2 different places. They're on the same latitude, but 2 different locations on the world. And we want to know how many miles separates them, and this is how we can do it. Moving on to the next page. Now we're going to build on this information. Now we're going to see our first map. There's nothing on it, it's just the grid system, which means that this line in the middle equals the equator. This one going here is going to be the prime meridian. So we notice that these are all in 30-degree increment boxes. So if this is the equator, then this line here must be 30 north, this must be 60 north, and this must be 90 north, and then going southward here. So I could ask, well, what are the coordinates of point A? Well, we always do latitude first. We see that latitude A is 30 degrees north of the equator, so it's 30 degrees north. And then longitude, we see that it is 30, 60, 90. It's 90 degrees west of the prime meridian. So the final answer would read 30 degrees north and 90 degrees west. So you'll complete that actually as you even Google or look at a globe to find locations that compare to those spots. And then down here, questions 14 and 15, it gets a little more complicated. Now it gives you or provides you the latitude and longitude, and it wants you to plot that on this graph. So knowing that the distance on this line, if this is a 30 degrees, this is 0, and this is 30 north right here, that means you could subdivide this into thirds, right? So this could be maybe 10, 20, and 30 degrees north, and that will help you locate those places. Question 16 takes the visual information here and has you replicate what you did for question number 9 using this graph. So, well, what's the distance from someone who lives at point A and wherever point D happens to be? Same thing, first step. How many total degrees separate those two locations? Then you look at the shared line of latitude and you use this table on page 2 to find out what the miles per degree are at that line of latitude, and that will give you the total distance. Moving on to page 4, here we have a statement saying that you need to correct the errors. So this actually takes you back to page 1 where it explains how do we subdivide degrees. It's quite interesting actually. It makes it, there's many ways we can do it. The two most prominent will be decimal degrees and how we subdivide locations. We don't do that as humans. It's too complicated for us. We let our cell phones and other devices do that. Instead, we use the formality of degrees, minutes, and seconds. It sounds a lot like time. It almost operates like time, but it has nothing to do with actual time. So what does that mean? Well, in a sense that we can think of this here, this degree value as hours, this is minutes, has one tick mark, and this is seconds. Well, so if this is the answer, 89 degrees, 47 minutes, and 65 seconds, it's asking you to correct the error. Well, that's pretty easy, right? Because you always start right to left. Well, if I say I'll be there in 65 seconds, that's actually incorrect. I should say I will see you in 1 minute and 5 seconds, right? Which means you convert these 60 whole seconds and turn those into a minute and roll it over and add it to this side. So then it would read 89 degrees, 48 minutes, and 5 seconds. And that's how you would write the answer in here. Oops. I tried to answer something there. So that's how you would do that. You start right to left. Then you would know that 48 would be the appropriate answer is correct, because if I say I'll be there in 48 minutes, that's fine too, right? It's when you are dealing with values over 60, we know that there's an error, like in this case here. 84, well, that is really wrong, right? Because 84 minutes is the same as 1 hour and 24 minutes. But again, that's not right either. You have to always start from right and work your way to left. So you'll do that. I will tell you right now, this one here is super hard. So I'm not going to grade this question, the one that says 185 degrees, 24 minutes, and 37 seconds. That's more of a brain buster. If you're into math, this will be actually quite interesting for you. But otherwise, these first here are much easier to solve. So do that. But this one's more for fun. So don't stress too much about that. The last part of page 4 is asking you to use an atlas, which most of you probably just don't have hanging around your house. So in that case, use your smartphones or devices and Google what are the latitude and longitude of these locations. It also asks you to do it towards the nearest degree, so you can round up. So now we're going to continue to build, and now we're introduced to our first map with actual places. So this one, do not Google the answers. I want you to actually try to distinguish what the actual latitude and longitude is for these locations. So as an example, we'll do Tokyo together. As we can see, Tokyo is here represented by that little red dot. So the first thing is to look at the latitude. Well, this line here represents 35 degrees north. So I can even subdivide this with 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Perfect. So I can roll along here and go, well, it's a little bit above 35. So I'm going to say it's probably 36 degrees north. And then I'm going to look at the longitude. Oh, it's right here. It intersects. There's 115, 120, 125, 130. It's probably closer to 139 degrees east. So my answer for this would be 36 degrees north and 139 degrees east as being the approximate latitude and longitude of Tokyo, Japan. Again, I want you to do it that way. I know you could easily just Google what it is, or you can search it up, but I want you to practice subdividing these lines of latitude. By no means am I asking you to get too crazy, because as learned above, and on the first page, and also in lecture, that you could subdivide it, right? Remember, if you say it's half of a degree, you can write that as 30 minutes. Or 0.5 as a decimal, but you don't need to worry about this here. Just kind of get the generalized idea. We'll work more with that subdivision in our next lab. So then the next page, page 6, is a much bigger map. So this one is actually an interesting map. You'll be utilizing and using this later in the semester. This one introduces all of the, well, not all of, the major plate boundaries. So that's why I wanted to use this map. So your job is to place the location of each one of these places. So as an example, letter A, it says, using the chart and map below, go ahead and plot where they go. Well, okay, so location, which is 0 degrees latitude, 0 degrees longitude, would be right about there. And I'd put a big dot, and then I would label it letter A, and you just go ahead and do that. So you'll plot letters A through E. Now we get here, distances and time. There are additional videos on Canvas for this. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it is a little overwhelming. So make sure you take your time and kind of read through it. But this is how we do it. Time on Earth can be understood two ways. The first one is using solar time. You and I do not use solar time. Solar time is using a sundial. That is utilizing your latitude, your longitude, and your position and distance from the sun at that exact moment. The other way that we utilize time is called standard time. That is an agreed upon time. That's what we use in our watches. So as it says here, it is also understood that every solar day is 24 hours. The Earth rotates 360 degrees in one day, which means it can be subdivided that we move the Earth. If it was like a clock, it would rotate counterclockwise 15 degrees per hour. Pretty neat, huh? So what does that mean? Well, by utilizing that idea that 15 degrees in an hour, or 1 degree in every 4 minutes of time, we're able to understand why there are time zones, why it is one time in one place and one time in another. So for the purpose of our activity, we will be utilizing solar time, okay? So we understand that the agreed upon time is looking at standard time, but I want to use solar time for the remaining part of this activity. So again, what is the big difference between the two? Well, as we'll find, that there's actually significant difference between two locations. Maybe you live in Los Angeles, somewhere maybe in Santa Monica, and maybe your friend lives somewhere maybe out in Rancho Cucamonga. Technically, by utilizing the sun, if you called your friend at this exact moment, it's technically 2 different times by utilizing the sun. So we don't do that, we chunk it. So we kind of, I always compare it to the old cell phone commercials where you can have rollover minutes. So what we do is we kind of reserve all of this time, and then we draw an arbitrary line and label it as a time zone and say, well, once you cross this line, it's a new time. It's either going to be earlier or later. And those are things that we can discuss as well in a moment. So that being said, let's say you live on a line of latitude, and question 38 says, what would be the actual solar time of someone living 1 degree west of the noon meridian? So we notice that we have a circle of illumination, meaning it's a line, literally, of where it divides light and day. The noon meridian is when the sun is at its zenith, or the highest point in the sky. So let's say it's solar noon for you, and you have a friend that's living 1 degree west of you. So what time technically would they be? Well, let's put it this way. We know that if I called someone in New York right now, it's technically later in time for them, right? By 3 hours. What if I called someone in Hawaii? It's going to be earlier in time for them. So we know that traveling westward, it's earlier in time. So that being said, if someone lives 1 degree west of someone who is experiencing solar noon, we know that 1 degree is equal to 4 minutes of time. Therefore, it should be 4 minutes or 1 degree earlier because they are westward. So that means if I called someone who lived 1 degree away from me, they're technically at 11:56 a.m. Moving here, question 39. What would be the time of someone living 4 degrees east of me? Well, east is going to be later, 4 degrees. 1 degree is 4 minutes. So that means they must be 4 times 4 is going to be how many? 16. So they are 16 minutes later than me. So that means that if I were to call someone who lived 4 degrees east of what I am living at noon, they must be at 12:16 p.m. All right. So that should be a start to kind of start working through this. There are additional videos on there because it does obviously get a little more complicated down in here. I can show you real quickly this one here. Let's say it's noon for someone who lives at 50 degrees west. What time is it at each of these following locations? You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is so complicated, but it's super easy. Think about it. These are longitudes, right? So I live at 50 degrees west. You live at 70 west. First step, how many degrees separate us? Well, 50, 60, 70. Because remember, when you head westward, it's okay. So there are 20 degrees that separate the two of us. Well, if I want to turn those degrees into time, there's lots of different ways you can do it. I like the chunking method, but it's up to you. So we know it's 20 degrees, and I know that every degree is equal to 4 minutes of time, then I know that someone who lives 20 degrees west of me, right? Because if I'm at 50 west and they're 70, 20 degrees times 4 minutes of time equals 80 minutes, which is equal to 1 hour and how many minutes? 1 hour and 20 minutes. So that means they're going to be 1 hour and 20 minutes earlier because they are west of my location than me. So if I'm at noon and they're 1 hour and 20 minutes earlier than me, that means they're going to be 10:40 a.m. So the answer for this one is 10:40 a.m. So make sure you play that again in case you need help on how I did the math. So these will have you kind of go back and forth. Remember, it's first step, total distance in degrees. Then you can convert the degrees into minutes and then convert them into hours, and you can solve from there. All right? Question 8, page 8, pardon. The public land survey, super important piece for us. There's nothing to write here. This is just the value that we use. The public land survey is a system that allows us to kind of distribute property into parcels. So maybe you've been driving on the freeway out in the middle of nowhere and you'll see, oh, there's 40 acres, 80 acres, 120 acres for sale. Well, that's because it's part of the public land survey. So the purpose of this is as people were moving out westward, we didn't know what was really there, especially as a territory. So how do we create a grid system that can just continue to grow and cover a large area? Well, essentially, it's a very complicated Excel program. That's what it is, but it's done by paper. So we can see that we can identify that there's T's and R's as townships and ranges. The township and ranges cover very large areas. You see, this is divided amongst the whole state. Then we can, like your Excel, you can take one box. So this box here has a value of township 2 north and range 1 east. And then you can subdivide it into sections and then take each section and subdivide it into quadrants. I'll take it slower. I'm just kind of putting it in perspective. So the way that this is done is very much like latitude and longitude, but this was much easier than using a survey equipment. So you just create a generalized baseline, which is essentially your latitude, and then you have a principal meridian, which is basically like a line of longitude. And by doing that, you create a grid. And these grids are 6 mile by 6 mile boxes. So I always think of it as township and range is the state. This is more of the county or city, and then you can continue to subdivide it until you get to your home. So let's look at an example. So the way that we do this as geographers is that this is, this is very similar to the map above. We know that letters D, C, B, A, J, all these letters are very far apart. We know these are 6 mile by 6 mile boxes. So you're probably thinking, well, how come they can be so close down here? Well, it's instead of redrawing this section box every single time when we want to do a bunch of different properties, we kind of just try to recycle as much as we can. So we know that as an example for letter J, that this box here will represent all of this box in here. So that's how that works. So as an example, J is here. Here's our regional baseline. Meridian J is in the box that has a value of range 4 east, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 east, and it's 1, 2 north, township 2 north. Then J is down here. We can subdivide this. I call it the snake method. It starts in the top right and wiggles and zigzags its way. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's in section number 4. And then each one of these boxes is divided into quadrants. Quadrants are, because there's north, south, east, west, but what is the space in between it? So this would be the northeast quadrant. Okay. So the way this is done is actually in reverse. We start small and big. So I always compare it, because I live in Santa Clarita, and I'm always like, people are like, oh, where do you live? And I would say, well, I live in a very small community called Val Verde. And then they'll go, where's that? And I go, well, it's part of unincorporated Los Angeles. We're really close to the city of Santa Clarita. And they're like, I don't know where that is. And I'm like, well, I'm 40 miles north of Los Angeles. And they're like, oh, where's LA? Is that like by San Diego? And like, I live in California. So you're going from your home and kind of working your way outward. So the way that I do this is I actually use colors. I color coordinate it. So I first look at this box that I'm drawing right here. So maybe I'll make that blue. So I always start with a small box first. I see that J is down here. So out of 1, 2, 3, 4, it's in the southwest corner. So J is in the southwest corner, as it's written here. Then I see, I made this line a little bit bolder. Maybe this is blue or something. J is up here out of 1, 2, 3, 4. So J is in the northeast corner. So it's in the southwest corner of the northeast corner of the section number 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's part of township 2 north and range 4 east. So this code would essentially, if I went to the county back in the early 1800s, I would go in and say, well, I'm in Nevada, and I live in the southwest quadrant or quarter of the northeast quarter of section 4 that's in township 2 north and range 4 east. They would be able to pull that up on a map and know exactly where I am. So let's kind of start with letter A, question number, 44 to practice. So I first go small. So these 4 here. These 4, right? It's in which corner? Well, it's in the northeast corner of the, now we move bigger, the bolded boxes, of the northwest. So it's in the northeast of the northwest. Section number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then so on, so forth. And there's also additional videos within Canvas in case this is a little more complicated. I know this was a lot. I know. Please take advantage of the video. Watch it often. Make sure you keep all of your notes, because you can use your labs on your exams. So do not lose your labs. They're very, very imperative to the success of this course, especially when you might get a question that says, hey, we go back to lab 1, and what is the location of person B on your township and range activity? And since you'll already have the answers down, you'll be able to just go ahead and put them in. Another thing I'll finish here is that if you're able, the labs have a due date. If you're able to turn them in early, and I will look at them and leave you feedback, and you will be able to resubmit. I will not be able, because all labs are due generally on Sunday nights at midnight. If you turn them in on Saturday, I will probably not be able to get it back to you in time. So if you can get them in by between Wednesday and Friday, I will do my best to grade them in advance so you can resubmit, okay? So take advantage of that opportunity. I hope this is helpful. Be sure to look at these supplementary videos that are also been provided within the Canvas modules, and we will talk soon as you start lab number 2 next.